In vivo from the University of Texas at Arlington, this is Charlas Entre Amigos, an initiative of the Edge Center funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Title V, Part B, promoting post-baccalaureate opportunities for Hispanic Americans grant. I'm your host, Alejandro Ruiz, coordinator of special programs for the Edge Center, and I'd like to welcome you to our very first episode. Whether you're a seasoned grad student, a fresh face on campus, joining us online, or just curious about the ins and outs of academia, then this is the podcast for you. I'll be your host for this journey through graduate life. Today, we're diving into the Edge Center and giving you an opportunity to hear from the people that make it all possible, nuestra gente, our staff. But before I introduce them to you, let me introduce you to the Edge Center itself. The EDGE Center stands for Empowerment, Development, and Growth in Education, and that's exactly what we're here to provide you. Located on campus at UTA in Science Hall 322, the EDGE Center encompasses a student lounge and private study rooms, career development advising, faculty professional development, and student scholarships. We offer events, resources, support, workshops, and a sense of comunidad for all graduate students here at UTA, helping them thrive academically, personally, and professionally. Now, let's talk about what you can expect from Charlas Entre Amigos. Each episode will tackle a different aspect of graduate life, from managing imposter syndrome to networking like a pro. We'll feature interviews with fellow grad students, faculty members, and experts in various fields to give you insight, advice, and who knows, maybe even a few laughs along the way. So now let's hear from the people that help make everything in the EDGE Center possible. Joining us today are EDGE Project Director Nancy Zamora and EDGE Career Development Specialist Catalina Molina. Ladies, bienvenidas a Charlas Entre Amigos.
Hi.
It's so good to have you all, and because we're on a limited amount of time, I want to just jump right in. And Nancy, I'd like to start with you. Can you tell us a bit about how the EDGE Center came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So it all started in October of 2022 when the institution received this particular grant in order to provide services for our graduate students here at UTA. Through those funds, we were able to open up the center as it stands today and offer a multitude of resources, including study spaces, student lounge, career development opportunities for our students, faculty, professional development opportunities, scholarships, travel stipends for students, and so much more. That you can find out more about on our website at www.uta.edu/hr/edge-center. So I welcome all of you to come by and visit our website and learn more about the different resources that we're able to offer through that.
And it's so wonderful to know, Nancy, that UTA is aware que aquí estamos y que no nos vamos. So, Catalina, we've been going for a little bit now, and I know we've only been around for a short time, but could you share some of your favorite moments that we've shared with our graduate students so far?
Yes, I can. And let me just say, it's been super awesome, honestly. Like, for my events, right, they're very career focused. And so seeing students network with our guest speakers, super incredible, because networking is one of those things where they don't really teach you out here in the streets in school. It's kind of something that you just have to go out there and do. And so seeing students push themselves out of their comfort zones and making those connections and really just putting themselves out there is a very rewarding feeling. I also have the privilege of meeting with students one-on-one and just seeing the confidence boosts, after the meeting. Like, they come in like really nervous and like really shy. But then after we have, like our discussions and we get to know one another and we feel a lot more comfortable, like, it's really great because you could see some hope in their eyes again that you really didn't see before they came in. And that really just warms my heart. It's one of the best feelings in the world.
Of course. I always talk about that light bulb moment that goes off for the students and just feeling very proud for them in that moment. So between what you and Nancy said, we've got a lot of good things going and so much more on the way. But since we're here to serve our UTA grads, I want to give each of you a chance to share briefly what your own graduate journeys were like. Nancy, let's start with you.
Yeah. So my graduate experience was a little different than your normal traditional undergrad to grad experience that some of our students get to experience. I actually took a long break, probably about 4 to 5 years between my undergrad. Actually, no, probably about 4 or 5 years between my undergrad and graduate studies. After completing undergrad, I was completely burned out. I did not think that graduate school was something for me, nor did I know much about graduate school for me to be excited or looking into like that next adventure in my education. I was ready to be done and to get out into the workforce and help my family along financially. So I chose not to go to graduate school right out of undergrad and started working. And after several years of working, I realized that if I wanted to climb the ladder that is higher education, or through higher education, that I needed to go back to school to receive that master's degree. And very hesitantly, and with a push from a very close friend of mine that was currently working with me, I decided to go to graduate school. And it wasn't one of those where I completely dived in. I took 1 class, 2 classes here and there, trying to figure out if that was truly the route that I wanted to go. And also battling imposter syndrome, battling just my own internal thoughts and negativity, as well as financial hardships, as I was fully, working full time, and also had responsibilities. I had my own home, I had bills, and things like that were, weighing heavily in the back of my head, as well as not having the support from my family as well. My family didn't quite understand why I was going back to school after I had already spent so much time in undergrad. And so I actually, when I announced to them that I had been accepted to graduate school, one of my sisters actually left. And not, at that point I was upset and really bummed about it, but didn't allow it to keep me down. I just grew to realize that she just didn't understand. And so from that moment on until I graduated with my master's degree, I had nobody to go to in my family to talk to about, what was happening, how hard graduate school was, or anything else in regards to graduate school. It wasn't until I was ready to cross the stage that I was like, hey, guess what? I'm graduating. And again, unfortunately, as I walked across the stage, I didn't have anybody from my family supporting me there or rooting me on, except for one of my sisters, because their response was, hey, you've already graduated so many times already. Like, we don't want to sit through another graduation, right? And half of them didn't really understand it either, just because it was English graduation ceremonies, and so they didn't understand because of the language barrier. So to them, they're like, whatever, we'll just, yay, congratulations on the backside, but that was it. But it took me a while. It took me 4 years until I finally graduated with my master's degree. It wasn't also, because again, I was taking 1 class, 2 classes, and an odd, semester here and there, I would take 3, but for the most part, just 1 or 2. Yeah, that's partly my experience with graduate school and a little bit of my journey through it. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Nancy. I know definitely probably what most people would consider a non-traditional, right, journey, but definitely one that we see a lot more with our students here, especially at UTA. But Catalina, you had a different experience and probably what most people would consider the traditional route for grad students. So tell us a little bit about what your experience was like.
Well, I was getting just a little nervous talking about my experience, because it was one of the most difficult things in my life. So Nancy, when you were talking about, your family, right? how like, you know, they were kind of taking a little bit step away, like disconnecting from your experience, right? For me, my family always had the expectation of me going to college. I am a first generation college student. Like, I'm like the first daughter, the first nieta, like the first niece, like so it was my job to lead the way for everyone else. I'm also the daughter of immigrants. My mom is from Ecuador and my dad's de El Salvador. And so my dad, he like dropped out of school in middle school, and then my mom, she moved here when she was 13 or 15, and she finished off her high school here, but she was never encouraged to pursue a collegiate degree. And so it was up to me to kind of, you know, make those dreams come true for my family. And so I graduated with my undergrad in 2020. And we all know what happened. Miss Pandemic Lovato. The pandemic happened. And so I really didn't get to celebrate, you know, this triumphant moment that my entire family has put upon me, right? I also, at that time, I barely figured out what I wanted to do in my life. Like, during undergrad, I knew the expectation was to be a doctor, a lawyer, or like something that makes a lot of money, right? But then I realized that, you know, the law that I wanted to do, like immigration law, right? Like, you don't make that much money. And it kind of felt like I was exploiting people who did not have the funds, you know, for my services in order to help them. Like, it was a whole thing. And then I just don't want to deal with people's lives in the medical field. I don't want to touch people. And that's okay. That's okay. I want to touch people's hearts.
I love it.
And so by the time I figured out what I wanted to do, I was very inspired by like my current supervisors at the time. And they were like, you got to get a master's degree. And I was like, okay, in what? And they were like, higher education. I said, okay, how do I do that? And so by the time I figured it out, I had missed the deadline. So I was forced to not only take a gap year, right? But I had to wait an entire year to finally apply for the program that I wanted. So I went to the University of North Texas in Denton for my undergrad and my grad degree. So I got in, I did the gap year, I worked at Walmart for the entire year during the pandemic, so y'all can only imagine, right?
I cannot.
And so coming in, right, my family had a similar response to yours, Nancy, where they were like, so you're going again?
Yeah.
But they were like, but what is a master's degree? And I was like, it's the one above a bachelor's. And they're like, oh, okay, so how far is that from a doctorate? And I'm like, it's like one below the doctorate. They're like, oh, wow, okay. So they were, once I explained it to them, they were like, okay, you're like the only one in the family to be doing that anyway. So like, keep it going. We didn't get to celebrate you the first time, so maybe the second time around, we can go big. And so I took a whole gap year. I got into my program, and I went in very hopeful, you know. Undergrad was actually pretty nice, but then grad school happened, and at the time I made the choice to move in with my partner, and so I can be closer and more financially stable while I'm going to grad school. I also, not only did I have a GA-ship with the university, but I worked a second job still at Walmart on the weekends. And so my schedule was, I was taking 3 credit hours per semester, working 20 hours a week at the university, working 16 hours a week at Walmart. And then on top of that, my second year, I was tasked with doing 2 internships. And it was a lot. I wasn't even like 1 month into my first GA-ship, my first year, and I had already felt imposter syndrome to its max. And it led me to a very dark place, to be honest with y'all. And it was scary because I've never felt that way before. And it really shocked me, but it also burnt me out. it's like when you're like driving a car and you're supposed to get the oil changed, but you never get the oil changed, and then 2 years later you're like, okay, I'm gonna do it now, and you have no oil. That was me.
Oh gosh.
And then your car's kind of burning, and you smell a little bit, and it's just like, oh, something is wrong. That was grad school, and I'm joking about it now, right? Because I'm finally in a.
You've been through it.
I've been through it. I've been through it, and I'm finally in a better place where I can joke about it. But it was very chaotic. It was really sad. Honestly, I didn't have a support system. My mom lived 30 minutes away from me, right? But I couldn't really talk to her about how I was feeling because mental health and my struggles always were responded with like, well, I'll pray for you, or like, si se puede, you can do it, échale ganas. But I literally had no more ganas to give, and I wasn't even like a month in, and like I would cry constantly, and my partner at home didn't know how to support me in the way that I needed to, because he didn't understand why I was struggling so hard when I had a life of privilege. In his eyes, right? Because I'm educated, like I'm working, but also I'm surrounded by people who are already educated. Like I've been through it once. So like, why are you struggling? Like you already have a degree, just do it again. The college bubble, as he would like to say. And my workload was a lot. I either had 0 days off or just 1 day off. But struggling with like extreme depression, like it made me physically like immobile, like a lot of the times when I would be home and I know I have to do homework and I know I have to be up early the next day, or like I know I have my Walmart job on Saturday and Sunday, but I can't get up and take care of myself, both physically, mentally. Like my house was a disaster, and so it was kind of bad. And because of my mental health, a lot of like my personal problems started bleeding into my work, and that also became a problem, and that was very worrisome. And it's unfortunate that the people that I had encountered at that time had to experience that version of myself, and those folks were like mentors and role models for me. I looked up to them so much because they were experts and they were good at what they did, and they did it so well. And I wanted to be like that. And I constantly compare myself to other people in order to measure my version of success. And so if I'm not doing what they're doing at the rate that they're doing it, I'm not succeeding. And that just made the imposter syndrome even worse. And I had learned so much from them, and I tried so hard to push myself to be better, but I couldn't. Like it was really stressful. I was turning in my schoolwork late. Like I've never skipped class in my life, like ever. And then grad school was the time where I was like, honestly, like I need to go home. Like I can't sit through 3 hours of class a day and be present. But as I said, like my mentors and my role models, like they gave me so much grace, where honestly I don't think I even deserved it with what was going on with myself. But they did, and they continued to encourage me, and they gave me opportunities to work around these struggles that I have been experiencing. And I learned so much from them. And and that's not to say that I didn't have good moments in grad school, right? I met some really cool people. I learned a lot. I learned a lot by doing. I learned a lot by seeing. And the best thing about my program was that they wanted us to get field experiences through our internships, which is how I met y'all, which is how I, develop a mentorship with one of the assistant directors over there, and I got to see the students. The students really just were one of the best things, because they'd come in, they're like, hey, Catalina, and then they tell me about their day, and then, I don't know, sometimes I was holding on to the really small victories that I would have, whether a student came out with more confidence, or, they felt comfort in what I had to tell them and the resources that I could give to them. And really, I take all that experience now, right, to just become the person I wish I had, who not only understands like the hardships of grad school, the technical things of grad school, but like so many times I hear stories about like grad school is like, it's great, it's hard, but it's great, you can do it. But like, what happens in between? Like, yes, it can be great and that's wonderful, but like, what happens if it's not? How can I get through this all in one piece? Because by the time I graduated, like, my family celebrated me, and yes, I was happy, but I didn't feel proud about graduating. I felt relieved that I made it out somehow. And you know, like I mentioned earlier, like, I really just want to become that person that I wish I had, who just holistically, like, kind of understood a little bit of everything in order to help me as a whole. And I think as professionals, we sometimes forget that, like, the student is not just a student, they're a human being. And sometimes you focus on certain parts of their lives more than others, and, you know, it kind of makes things a little confusing and a little muddy, and I'm shaking. Yeah, I hope to take my experiences and to not only continue to reflect and to think about, like, the good things that I did, but also, like, the things that did happen and how I can continue to take care of myself, but to also inspire students to, you know, seek out the resources that we have in order to push forward. So
For sure. Thank you so much for sharing and for being vulnerable with us, Catalina. You said it yourself, grad school's tough, it can be scary, and sometimes you don't know where to turn. But in spaces like the Edge Center, aquí estamos para apoyarnos el uno al otro. So that's always good to know, right? Now, we're running short on time for today, so I want to close out with this. What are your hopes for the Edge Center? And what do you hope our students can walk away with once our time here at UTA is done? And Catalina, I'd like to start with you.
So with our grant, like, the whole purpose is for it to be institutionalized, right? And, you know, the folks who were able to do the research and point out that there is a need on our campus, like, we want to make sure that that need is addressed even after our grant is finished, right? And so I hope that, you know, the institution takes either the entire office or just parts of our office and makes it their own and continues the work that we're doing for graduate students, because it's really important. I also want students to have a sense of belonging. In grad school, I was like, oh my God, I'm surrounded by, like, undergrads everywhere. Even though I went there for undergrad, but I was like, where are, like, the grad students only that's not at my job or that's not in class, like a third space. And then just bigger, better programming. You know, there are small things happening across everywhere on campus, right? And then, you know, there's us here in Science Hall 322. But how can we make it bigger? How can we make it better? And that's really what my hope is. And I hope students walk away, you know, after their time at UTA, that we're happy that you're here. Like, we hear you, we see you, and there's always someone in your corner rooting for you.
Of course. Thank you so much for sharing. I love that, Catalina. Now, Nancy, what are your thoughts for the Edge Center and our students?
You said that so aggressively. I'm kidding. So for myself, I you know, and Catalina mentioned it earlier, there's this misconception of, you know, graduate students that you're supposed to know it all because you've been through undergrad, and so you should know how to seek out resources. You should know how to, you know, write a paper. You should know how to X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, right? And my hope is that through this, that we no longer, you know, put that on the student. We provide them. We know that there's a need there, that we're addressing their needs throughout their time here at UTA. We're helping them be successful. We are helping them to have a better sense of belonging on campus as a graduate student, and to continue that past, like Catalina said, past the grant, for us to continue to serve. And the hope is for us to not be gone, right? Mm-hmm. Is to continue on, and to continue to serve students and continue to grow our programming and our resources, and continue to shed a light in the needs of our graduate students. each and every day that we're here and that we continue on. And to provide them with that space here where they can come in and feel like they have somebody to count on, somebody who will listen to them, somebody who will support and cheer for them, whether it's that, we wrote a paper and you made an A and you've never received an A on a paper before, or you worked really hard on a project, a poster presentation, and you've never done that before, and so you're excited, and we celebrate with you. We celebrate your successes, and we pick you up when you're down, and just provide that support on campus. And it's great that if you are able to have that support from home, that's great. But sometimes there's a different level of support, that someone who understands and has been through the things that you've been through already. It makes a difference, and it helps you keep pushing and help you see that if, Catalina, and I, like, we were able to do it, then you can too. Because trust us, it was, when we say it was not easy.
It was not easy.
But we got through it. And, I don't feel like I am the smartest person in the world or anything like that. So knowing that I'm just a normal person, again, like Catalina said, from, low income, first generation background, parents who were immigrants with a less than middle school education, being, that giving us that opportunity to utilize all of that and push us forward, and continuing to better ourselves as individuals, as families, as communities, and continue to pull people up and not push people down. And so that is my hope, is to continue to provide that support, continue to provide the resources that are necessary to help everyone be successful in their journey in higher education.
Period.
Drop mic.
And I echo everything you all say. Thank you so much for sharing, Nancy. And thank you to both of you for sharing your stories and your hopes for our students with us. You also get the honor of being our first guest. So shout out to y'all. Y muchísimas gracias de nuevo. Okay, cuídense.
Bye.
Gracias.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into this episode of Charlas Entre Amigos. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future conversations. Remember, whether you're a grad student or just curious about graduate life, we're here to support you every step of the way. Until next time, mi gente.